Hello and welcome. If this is your first time with us, thanks for stopping by. You are listening to Choose to Endure, the show dedicated to the non-elite runners, where we share stories, interviews, gear, and training tips specific to the tail-end heroes of the ultra universe. If you haven't had a moment to do so yet, please consider heading over to your favorite podcast app, hit follow, rate the show, and if you're getting something of value, leave a review and let others know. My name's Richard Gleave. I have been running ultras now since 2017. I've taken on and finished numerous ultra distances all the way up through 220 miles, and I am unashamedly a member of the back of the pack, just like many of you. Now today, I am thrilled to welcome a fellow UK inhabitant, Mr. Nick Hancock, to the show. Nick is a UK athletics licensed and USCA ultra running certified coach who's transformed his passion for running into a career helping countless athletes improve their performance through tailored training plans. With a background in competitive racing and a focus on balancing strength training with running, Nick brings a wealth of knowledge to our discussion today, where we're planning to dive into the what, why, when and how of strength training for slower ultra runners. So join us as we are about to get into it right after this.
Discover raw, inspiring stories from runners who've been right where you are. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with your host.
He's English, not Australian.
Richard Gleave.
Nick, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for sparing a little time to talk to us today. How are you doing? And more importantly, I think I would be a bit remiss if I didn't ask how the weather was over there right now.
Yeah, hi Rich, how are you doing? Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been pretty grim. I will tell you, the weather has been awful. I mean, I actually got quite lucky on my long run today. I managed to squeeze in 18 miles in between torrential, and I mean torrential downpours. It has not stopped for 2 weeks, I'd say. It's been pretty bad.
Well, that sounds about right. Since I'm heading back over there in a couple of weeks, it probably will start raining like crazy. But I'm okay with that. Where we're coming from, it's super hot. So I'm looking forward to a bit of rain, but maybe not quite that much.
I must admit, at the time of recording this podcast, I'm just getting packed to head out to Colorado, actually, tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to some sunshine over there.
Fantastic. Well, we'll be trading. I'll pass you by. I'll give you a wave in the airport as we cross paths. Very good. All right. So strength training, Nick, most of us probably know we should be doing it or perhaps should be doing more of it. But maybe we should start this particular discussion by going over the reason why first. So can you give us kind of the breakdown of the importance of incorporating strength training into any ultra runner's routine, really, but especially if it makes a difference for back of the pack runners like us?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, strength training is not something for, that just the elites do because, they can fit it into their training. It's not something that's, I call myself a competitive ultra runner. I guess I do tend to find myself at the more front end of the pack, but I coach people at all ends of the pack. And I always say, I actually think that back of the pack runners have more to be gained from doing strength training than perhaps an elite because they're out there for longer. They need more strength. They need their muscles to be able to cope with the demands of being out there for longer. So that's kind of one of the first things that I would say straight away is that I think somebody who is spending more time out there could just do with that ability to endure the demands of ultra running, and certainly strength training is one of the most effective ways of doing that. The other thing that we hope to gain from strength training, it's not 100% certain that strength training does actually prevent injury, and I think that's a word I always use really carefully, that preventing injury is always multifactorial. So strength training isn't going to stop you from getting injured, but before everybody runs to cancel their gym memberships, we hope that it does do that. I actually always have this saying, and it's from a book, and I can never remember what the author is, but weak things break. So if we can be stronger, then we are ultimately going to certainly help prevent injury. We're not going to prevent injury, but help prevent injury. So, that's one of the things that we hear most often about. Why should I do strength training? It's we tend to hear that it is because we want to prevent injury. However, some of the other things that you're going to gain from it are, like I've already sort of touched on, you're going to gain more strength in your muscles and more muscular endurance through that. Sort of, even just if I just spoke from an anecdotal personal basis, N of one basis, ever since I started doing more strength training and really sort of doing the right strength training, I definitely don't feel the same aches and pains that I used to before I started doing strength training, particularly towards the back end of races, when you are starting to break down, you are starting to get tired, your form's starting to collapse. I don't get that as much now, particularly things like the aching glutes, or in the ultramarathon context, particularly the really hilly ones or the mountainous ones. My quads don't get as smashed up as they used to.
Yeah.
The big turning point for me was when I got Achilles tendonitis. That was sort of a big one. The big turning point for when I really started knuckling down on my strength training, because any good physio worth their salt is going to give you rehab through the means of strength training. And it was sort of from there that I really started making sure I was doing my strength training on a weekly basis. And touch wood, I haven't become injured since, but I would also say I've become faster through it, and in an ultramarathon context, faster because I'm able to keep moving for longer, just
more consistent.
Yeah, particularly as I say, when things start to break down, form is better. I'm able to keep upright better. I'm not sort of dragging myself along. So and just from the clients I work with, that is quite often one of the biggest things that they will say is that they just felt stronger. That word, I felt stronger. I felt strong through the race. It's because they do not just strength work, but they do the right strength work.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a minute. One of the other things I postulate for strength training too, as a reason to put it in, is more. So and this is really just, again, N of one me, but I feel like it helps with recovery too. I mean, I think, anecdotally, I tend to recover faster since I've been doing the strength training. Is that just me, or is that something we could throw out there as well?
No, absolutely. I know we're going to probably talk about this a bit later on, but after my attempt at CCC, I was back running 2 days later.
Oh man, yeah.
And again, it's because I felt fit and strong.
Yeah,
and that you're right. I do. I recover much quicker. I see my athletes that I coach recover much quicker. They're sort of usually back to some semblance of normal running within a week or two.
Yeah, depending
on the length of the ultra that they've done, which quite honestly, I don't think most of them would if they didn't do strength training. So yeah, I'd 100% agree with you there.
Now, one of the reasons when we bring up strength training in the pub chat that we have going on within our ultra running space out here, one of the reasons that I hear a lot for potentially not having done any or as much strength training is that, hey, I just don't have time to fit strength training in among all the running that I'm doing. So, do you have any thoughts on how we can sort of effectively integrate some level of strength training into what is presumably already a busy schedule in life? Should we be making room for it, or can we fit it in some other ways as we're going so as not to impact the running training itself?
Yeah, no, there are some ways. I mean, I tend to say that everybody's schedule is different. So if you're running, let's say you're running 7 days a week, you could quite happily drop one of those runs and fit a good, proper strength session in, without it affecting your running. In fact, I think it would probably improve your running purely because you're building that strength, which is another part of the reason why we need, as runners, to do strength training, is because, we get a lot of muscular endurance from just going out and doing the running. I know I can probably hear the people screaming at at their headphones right now saying, oh yeah, but just go and do some hill running. Yes, hill running does build running specific strength, but it builds strength only to a certain point. We need to be lifting heavy weights ideally to build strength, because that's what us runners are missing.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme. So yeah, it would depend on someone's schedule. I would say in the very, very rare occasions I've coached people who don't do strength training, which is very, very rare now. I mean, I'm talking unicorn rare. I had one guy who could only run 3 days a week. He just had a crazy job. He's a lead pharmacist for a hospital, lots of hours, lots of time on his feet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And also, if he did any more running, his wife would probably kill him. So family commitments, basically.
Yeah.
So he could only run 3 days a week, and there was no other opportunity whatsoever to get a strength training session in, because it would mean cannibalizing one of those runs, which, as an ultra runner, and we were working towards a 148-mile canal race, which he completed. In fact, he was about sort of middle as in the finishes, 70% DNF rate.
150-mile canal race. I mean, There's nothing worse than running on a dead straight flat canal.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. Was that the Grand Union?
It's one of those series of races. It's the Kennet and Avon Canal.
Okay, yeah. Ooh, tough mental challenge, that one, as much as physical.
Yeah, huge. Especially when he ran pretty much past his house at about 110 miles.
Oh. Hopefully somebody was standing outside with a pork pie as he ran by. I don't know.
Yeah, but he finished the race, and he's one of the rare people that I would say, okay, we can't cannibalize any more of your running, because already we're having to be quite creative, quite efficient with what it is we're doing with his running. So in the times where he could do some strength training, it was in his house, it was with bands or a couple of kettlebells that he had.
Yeah.
And we would keep it to pretty short sessions, 3 or 4 times a week. And when I say short, I'm talking like 10 minutes tops, because, it was kind of, I'll just do something quickly in my lunch hour, or before the kids go to bed, or after the kids have gone to bed, whatever it might be, to be quite time efficient. So there are things like that you can do.
Yeah, I think people, when they hear strength training, their mind goes to, okay, first of all, I need a gym. I need to go to the gym. I need to spend an hour in the gym lifting, doing whatever. But I do think and I do sort of a similar thing. I do like 20 minutes in the morning when nobody else is up, and I just have some dumbbells, and there's stuff you can do with that I think is still reasonably good strength training, but it's just fitting it in around time that you already have, or making a short amount of time. I mean, point being there, I don't think you have to feel like you got to go to the gym for an hour and find that space just to get some benefit from strength training.
No, not at all. I mean, I would say that having something like a gym, or a home gym, or squat rack and barbell, that kind of thing is the most ideal scenario. But even then, we're not talking about. I actually, I say to my athletes, if I've given them a strength session, or if it's before I've started coaching somebody, or just generally chatting with somebody, if they're doing more than about 30 to 40 minutes of strength training at any one time, then they're doing too much. Because the thing with strength training is that it's very demanding on the central nervous system, and it can take quite a lot to recover from if you do too much of it. Like if you do your strength session and then for the next 3 days you're suffering from huge DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, and I think everybody in the world has who's tried some sort of fitness program or something has had DOMS at some point in their life. How debilitating that can be. So I always say that if you've gone to that point where you need that much recovery, you've done way too much. And it surprises people when I say, well, so, okay, what would a strength session look like? For most of my athletes, and for me, I generally do 2 sets of each exercise, because that's, you print off any strength training program from the internet and everything is like 3 sets of 15, for example, 3 sets of 12. So that's kind of getting into the realms of what bodybuilders need to do to be able to build muscle. We're getting into that hypertrophy, muscle growth range of things. actually what we need to be doing, because we want to develop strength, is actually ideally more weight, less repetitions, and not too many sets, so that you end up having to do, spend 3 days recovering from it, and then that impacting on the quality of your running. So for me, a typical sort of strength session for me or one of my athletes would be 2 sets of 5 to 6 repetitions per exercise. And we might be talking 6 exercises that target, depending on where you are in your strength training plan, but it'll be things like squats, deadlifts, bench press, rows, and overhead press. And those are your 5 compound movements. Those are kind of the 5 big movements that a bench press, for example, a bench press is not a chest exercise. It's actually a full body exercise when it's done properly. Squats, it's not leg day. Squats are whole body. In fact, you stand to gain more core strength from doing proper squats than you would do from doing 100 crunches.
Interesting. Yeah. And so how often should we be looking to incorporate these 5 core sessions, or 5 core exercises, I should say, into sessions in your weekly training plan? I think you mentioned like maybe a couple of times per week. Is that ideal? Should we be doing more? Ideally,
a couple. I wouldn't do any more. Don't really see any need to do any more for the most part anyway. I mean, I think if you are in a period where let's say your A race is 9 months away, then maybe you could spend 6 weeks doing 3 or 4 strength sessions a week if you really, really wanted to, if you really wanted to sort of put yourself through that kind of structured training program. But, for most people, 90% of people, I'd say, who even like me, I don't ever really do more than 2 sessions a week because my race calendar is pretty full.
Yeah.
My A race isn't 9 months away. I've got races pretty much every month. So, they might not all be A races, but I certainly don't want to be spending 4 days in the gym. So 2 a week is, for me, the sweet spot. And those 5 exercises would be split between the 2. So, for example, you wouldn't want to do your squats and deadlifts on the same day because they're 2 big exercises.
That would be a challenge. Yeah,
that's quite a lot for your central nervous system. So I tend to separate squats and deadlifts out. I tend to separate bench press and overhead press out, so they're on 2 separate days.
Yeah, and so do you think that any of that changes either specifically for slower runners, for back of the pack? Does that change the narrative at all, or for in the instance where we're going long, let's say we're doing 200 miles or a 72-hour race or something where you're going to be out for a ridiculous amount of time? Does that change the narrative at all, or is it still no? It's pretty standard. This is the stuff you should be doing.
Yeah, those 5 exercises are kind of your base. It depends on, as you get closer to your race, you should get more specific.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not the only exercises I would use. I'm just talking about those should be in your program because they are full body compound exercises that, like I said, squats are not leg day, deadlifts are not back day. They are full body exercises that benefit your entire central nervous system, your entire posterior chain, you name it, it's there to support you, particularly, something like a squat, because of the demand on the whole body. As soon as you get towards, start getting towards the end of your race, that's where your squats come in, because you've built a strong body all over.
Yeah.
It really helps with your posture. So, but then there's other things, you want to think about unilateral exercises. So unilateral meaning single. So single leg stuff. You might want to do single leg split squats, single leg deadlifts, single leg glute bridges. There's a whole raft of exercises out there that are going to support you on race day, and not forgetting your upper body as well. And not just supporting you on race day, but supporting your training in general.
Yeah, I think upper body is something that people miss, because I feel like running is a whole body activity, right?
100%.
And so don't sleep, as they say. Don't sleep on the upper body, at least in some part. And especially for bigger races where there's required gear and the weight starts to build up a bit.
Yeah.
When you put all that in your pack and you start running, I mean, you're going to need a bit of something to help kind of offset that as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, 100%. We all have, for the most part, we all have two arms. Our arms are a big part of the running gait. So why wouldn't you train them? Why wouldn't you train your upper body to, it's no good having a strong lower body if your upper body isn't strong enough to support it. So yeah, it's hugely important to do that.
Absolutely. Now, Nick, are there with the folks you've trained over the years, or people that you've run into, are there some common mistakes maybe that we should look to avoid, especially if we're going to start strength training, if we're just moving into it? What would you see as some common mistakes that we make, aside from maybe just, as we talked about, doing too much, especially too soon, I would imagine, with the DOMs and so on affecting the rest of your running? But are there any other mistakes you've seen people make?
Yeah, 100%. So doing follow-along strength programs on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
That is a mistake, because 99.9% of the time it's somebody with a couple of dumbbells that probably weigh like 2 kilos, and it's not strength work at all. It doesn't even resemble strength work. I talked about using heavy weights, and obviously that is all relevant. I can squat 140 kilos, but I've got athletes I coach that can squat 30 kilos because that's heavy for them.
Yeah.
And then they build from there. So heavy should be relative to you. Heavy doesn't mean that you need to go and start throwing 45-pound plates on every bar that you come across. So I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah. Common mistakes we're going for.
Common mistakes. So the thing with YouTube videos is that they will tend to be not enough weight. And then kind of leading on to the sort of the next common mistake that people make is doing too many repetitions.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
The sort of the logical train of thought that people have is, okay, so I'm going to be running and I'm going to do tens of thousands of steps when I do my run or my race. So therefore I should do loads and loads and loads and loads of lunges, or loads and loads and loads and loads of squats, because that's going to, I need that muscular endurance. You can't really build that kind of muscular endurance in the gym. You can build muscular endurance, but not that kind of muscular endurance. The muscular endurance that we're looking to build in the gym is through strength. And the other thing that doing too many reps it is a mistake is that when we are training for our races, we are constantly looking to manage fatigue, right? Where we don't want to run too much because we need to be able to recover. If you are then adding in loads of repetitions with not much weight, you're just adding to that fatigue. When you lift heavy weight for smaller amounts of repetitions, you don't build that kind of fatigue. You do put pressure on the central nervous system, but you don't add so much to the fatigue with smaller amounts of repetitions, because you're getting the thing when you do lots of repetitions, when it starts feeling heavy, you've probably already done 10, 15, 20, 30 repetitions, which didn't really do much. If you add enough weight to maybe lift 5 repetitions and leave 1 or 2 in reserve, you're pretty much straight away getting into the heavy lifting. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see people making is assuming that because we're doing lots of running, you need to do lots of repetitions, and you don't. You do lots of repetitions when you go out running.
Okay, so do less reps, heavier weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
perfect.
And I kind of touched on it earlier. Don't spend too long doing it. If you're doing, if you're in the gym for longer than 30, 40 minutes doing your strength training, you've probably done too much.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, and I think you might have touched on this as well, but I wanted to ask whether strength training as a program, as part of our running, would evolve from, let's say, an off-season through peak training, but also what about taper? How should I be approaching, or should I be doing any strength training as I taper into final week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, before my race? Should I be ditching strength training at that, or do I keep it and instead kind of pull down on the volume? Like where does strength training fit into kind of off-season, the peak training, and then particularly the taper?
Yeah, so I touched on the off-season part earlier, if somebody is having a true off season where they've got plenty of time to build that base, then they could probably be doing maybe 3 or 4 strength sessions with some lighter weight, more repetitions, probably less running, because maybe you want to build some additional muscle before you then go into doing your heavier stuff. You start running more muscle will translate into better strength. The closer you get to race day, the more specific you want to be getting with your strength training. So and progressing your strength training as well. So if you've been doing single leg split squats, for example, change that up to single leg split squat with your foot in a TRX band. There's so many variations that we could go through. I won't dwell on that too much. And then when you do get into the taper, very similar to your running, is you should reduce the volume but keep the intensity.
Okay.
So we do that with our running. We should be reducing the volume as we go into taper, but you can keep the intensity. So if you've been doing race pace practice, you would continue to do race pace practice right up until a few days before the race. You would just do less of it. And it's exactly the same with strength training. If you've been squatting 50 kilos in the last couple of weeks, then keep it at 50 kilos, but instead of doing 2 sets, do 1 set.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. I like it. Yeah, I think it's one of those questions that if you asked your running friends, you'd get a whole bunch of different answers, especially as you move into taper, what to do with your strength training. So yeah, pretty interesting. Just kind of mirror your running. I think most of us know what we should be doing from a running perspective with the volume there. So yeah, okay, interesting.
One thing I would maybe do, which actually I probably do with most of my athletes, is, so let's say somebody's doing 2 strength sessions in a week, and obviously race day is usually a Saturday. I would do the first strength session of the week with just 1 set per exercise, as I said, drop that volume down. And then perhaps the second strength session, that let's say that strength session might have been on the Thursday or Friday in their normal week. Then in that case, I would cut that strength session out and say, don't do any strength that day. Use that extra time to go and get a pre-race massage or have a hot bath or go to sleep. Sleep some more, particularly if it's a long ultra where you need sleep. Just spend that week getting extra sleep. We know we can bank sleep, so get the extra sleep.
And so you mentioned the different days of training there, and this is purely it's a question that's come up a couple of times as I've been out running with people, and we get into talking about stuff as you do on a trail. But from a strength perspective, is there benefit from doing strength and running the same day, or would you say we should be doing strength training kind of on an off day from running? Can we maximize running if we add it with strength, or should we be separating the two to allow for some recovery time in between?
Yeah, this question has been going round and round and round in running circles and strength circles and concurrent training circles for many, many years, and I still don't think there's a definitive answer to this.
Well, what would you advise?
So the science says that the most optimal way would be to keep your hard days hard and your easy days easy. However, on balance and on a personal level, I tend to find that if I've got a session, as in a running, hard running session, and a strength session on the same day programmed, I find that's too much.
Yeah.
So I prefer to split them and do strength training on an easy day, where the total intensity of that day is then therefore reduced. I tend to find that works better for me, and I tend to find that on the whole works better for the athletes that I coach. And the athletes I coach are people with busy lives, busy jobs, tend to be sort of 30 to 60 years of age.
Yeah.
I definitely think some of the younger folks can handle it, no problem. But you know what, for me, and most of my clients, particularly when you've got a hard running session and a strength session, and then you've got work and kids and chores to do.
Yeah.
It's just too much. So, do you know what? And this is the thing, I always kind of come back to the science. Yeah, the science says this, the science says that. The science is generally done on 25-year-old sub-elite male athletes. I'm not a 25-year-old sub-elite male athlete, and neither are probably all of the people listening to this podcast, or the kind of people that I work with in my coaching business. So yeah, sometimes the science can move to one side, should we say?
No, I agree 100%. And I think to some degree too, there's this element of listen to your body, right? You know you better than anyone. And so if you are trying to do strength training on the same day that you're, maybe you do strength in the morning and you run in the evening, or vice versa, whatever it is, if you're trying that and it's not working, like it's really impacting your ability to perform one or other of those as you're supposed to per your plan, then I would say change it and try again. But I think it's that, for me, you got to listen to your body a little bit. And if you are able to do that, great. At the moment you're not, I would say it's probably time to look at changing it perhaps. But
100%. It's always going to be down to the individual. And you know what? Some people can't do strength and run on the same day. It's if you've got a 1 hour run and then we're talking about going into the gym for half hour, 40 minutes. Some people don't have that midweek.
Yeah.
They've got work, they've got kids, they've got stuff to do. So you've got no choice but to do a hard run and then your strength training the next day. I would always try and keep it that way around. Our priority here is running.
Right.
So try and run first and then do your strength training later. If you're doing that on the same day, then get your run in. And if you are going to do your strength training close to your run, do it straight after. If you're not going to do it close, give it at least 6 to 8 hours.
Let those muscles recover.
Get some recovery in, yeah.
Now, you talked about going to the gym, and as did I a couple of times, but there's a lot of folks out there, especially the demographics of the podcast here, and to some degree, a lot of ultra running. It is, as you've kind of alluded to, like the 30 to 60. And there's a few people either side of that, but that's generally where we land with the ultra running group. So there may well be a few folks on the higher end of that who might feel intimidated by strength training, especially if you're going to the gym where you've got all those big dudes who are 20 years old grunting a lot and dropping weights. Do you have any thoughts about where should those folks start? Is it okay to start at home with some resistance bands that we talked about earlier and some of the body weight stuff, and then kind of work up to dumbbells and whatever else you want to do? Or like where would those folks start?
Yeah, no, you do not need to get to a gym. That is the ideal scenario because, first of all, range of equipment's better, the weight available is better as you start to progress. But if you didn't want to go to the gym or you didn't have access to one or cost, there's so many reasons why not to, and that's totally fine. I actually have a guy who I coach, lives in the middle of nowhere in Scotland. He also doesn't have a garage at home. He's not able to set up a squat rack and that kind of thing. So there's some great stuff out there nowadays. Great equipment available out there. Certainly in the UK, and I'm sure in the US, you guys have got them over there. But there are adjustable dumbbells where all you do is you turn the dial on the end of the dumbbell, and we've got dumbbells here that range, I'm thinking in pounds, anything from sort of £4 all the way up to £80.
Wow.
And it's just one set of dumbbells.
Yeah.
And all you do is turn the dial, you pick them up, and it'll be the weight that you've selected. So they're super space saving. They're not super cheap, but they're not super expensive either. And you can get so much done with just a pair of dumbbells.
Yeah. So
much done. A couple of kettlebells, pretty easy to pick up, go on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or, whatever, garage sale, whatever, somebody's going to have some kettlebells. There's some great stuff you can do with kettlebells as well. So plenty that can be done. I do tend to say to people, unless you are really, really, really starting from ground zero, then don't do body weight for the most part.
Okay.
Because you're getting body weight done through your running anyway. Body weight will only really build strength to a very limited point. And usually body weight is kind of sort of phase 1, maybe phase 2 in a rehab program. That's kind of where, from a physiotherapist, if you get injured, that's where a physiotherapist will start you out, is kind of body weight stuff. When we're talking about getting strong, then we need to be adding resistance.
Right.
So I tend to say, for the most part, body weight isn't really going to help much.
Very good. Now, Nick, talking of resistance, perhaps, I did want to let folks know that Nick here has just got back and is probably in recovery at this point, to kind of link to our previous conversation there, from UTMB, from the CCC is what your race was out there, Nick. So I really did want to make space in the chat here to ask you about that, and to kind of, because I know certainly over here UTMB is as big as it is, I'm sure, in Europe, and everybody looks to I want to go do UTMB, and so I think prior to coming on air, I was just saying I think people kind of sometimes overlook CCC and maybe even OCC as a place to start and kind of get your feet wet in alpine running on the technical terrain over there. So if I can ask, and if you have a few minutes to talk about your CCC experience, what made you choose that race, and how did that fit into your overall racing goals, and how is maybe we'll get to how it went first, and then I'll ask how your recovery is going.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you said I'm in recovery. No, I mean, I loved it to start. Let's just get that out there. What an event. And I know UTMB have had their shortcomings. They've made some mistakes particularly over 2023.
Yeah.
The Dacia sponsorship was not very good for the environmentalists out there. Firing Corinne Malcolm, who's kind of the voice of UTMB commentary, that was not very good. And then obviously the Whistler saga.
Yes, that was pretty big on this side of the pond.
It was pretty big here too. So
yeah.
Gary Robbins is a very well loved figure. So they've made some mistakes, and I kind of get that, but a lot of people don't like the whole UTMB pyramid scheme of you have to do a qualifying race, and it is expensive. Let's not beat about the bush. But in terms of the race organization, in terms of the community out there, the buzz, just awesome. I would highly recommend anybody going through said UTMB pyramid scheme to get there, because it was absolutely incredible, and France is just fantastic, and the scenery, you just don't think you can beat it, really. So, but yeah, what a race. I mean, particularly for people coming from your side of the pond. And I know quite a few American coaches and athletes that say the same thing, is that the ascents and descents are very steep. I don't think you kind of have that steepness for the most part of the races that go on in the US. The kit requirements is definitely a big change, because a lot of races in the US, you don't really need poles, or in fact, some of them, you're not even allowed poles, right?
Right. Absolutely.
The mandatory kit requirements aren't very stringent, but over in Europe, our mandatory kit requirements are a bit over the top, if I'm honest. Particularly at CCC, where they called UTMB. In fact, the whole week they called the hot kit was needed. So because it was pretty warm, so you had to have additional bottles, but you still had to carry thermal bottoms, thermal top, waterproof top, waterproof bottoms. So yeah, the kit is pretty crazy, really. But aside from that, an amazing race. I started a little bit far back, so I had quite a bit of working my way through the field to do. I think I must have started somewhere, because I'd done a big race already in the UK at the end of July, so I probably still had a little bit of fatigue in my legs from that, or certainly thought I would. So I thought I'll just go in, enjoy the experience, and not worry too much about where I place. But my racing head came on, and I think
the competitive edge kicked in.
I think I made my way from something like 2000th up to about 340th at one point.
Wow. That's a huge jump. Well, first of all, that's a huge amount of people in a race. I don't know that there are many, if any, races here that are that many people in a race.
Yeah.
But that's a big jump.
Well, here, like Western States, it's like 350 people.
Yeah.
I mean, UTMB's at least 4 times that.
mean, that's just insane to even,
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched it on TV, but just to think about being there in the midst of that with all that, with all the streets and the people hanging out the windows and all that, it just sends a chill up your spine.
Yeah. I mean, there is a real buzz. I think the only thing I would say with CCC was the first climb out of Courmayeur up to Tête de la Tranche was a queue. I lost, we all lost a good hour just from queuing to get up to the first peak. And it's pretty steep, lots of
big chain
cutbacks. And once you kind of got past the first aid station, it opened up a bit. And like from a personal perspective, I was feeling great, like really good. I was running super well. My running ability, the flats and the downhills were certainly helping me. I was overtaking people a lot and just having a great time, really. My feeling was good. My hydration, I thought, was really good. And because I kind of learnt my lesson from the race I'd done at the end of July in the Lake District, because it was pretty warm that day. And I just didn't drink enough and couldn't fuel. Still did okay, but anyway, so in my bid to stay super, super hydrated, because there are fountains everywhere in the Alps. So I said, right, I'm gonna make sure I drink from all the fountains. I'm gonna stay really, really hydrated.
Right.
But I think in my bid to stay hydrated, I drank so much plain water that I think I went slightly hyponatremic.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah, my hands and face started tingling, and I was this was coming out of Trion, which is about 70k into the race of 100k.
That's good. Yeah, I want to say that's probably 2/3, 3/4 of the way in. At this point.
Yeah, I got about a third of the way out of the climb of from Trion. I left Trion waving at the aid station camera, the live stream, and I was in great spirits. I was loving it.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to finish this in 12 hours. I'm flying here. A third of the way up the climb, I just started feeling really nauseous, and then I puked and kept puking, and I kept trying to push on, but I was so far away from the next aid station that just from a safety aspect, I had no choice but to call it in. So yeah, unfortunately DNF'd, but it is definitely a DNF that I do not regret, because it was the right call to make at the time. And I loved it. I had a great race, loved it so much. And want to go back.
Is that a race, Nick, that you would recommend, the CCC, or like I said, maybe even the OCC, as a sort of starter race for particularly folks from anywhere in the world to come to the Alps and get your feet wet?
Definitely not a starter race, purely because you have to qualify for it anyway. You have to do one of UTMB's World Series races.
Yes, yeah.
To get the running stones, and this could be, you could do a whole podcast episode on how to get running stones.
Maybe I will, because I was around when they were doing tickets but I got lost when we went to stones and the very specific races. So maybe I'll do an episode on that.
They are basically still tickets. So effectively, so the race I did was the Ultra Trail Snowdonia in North Wales,
dang. That's a tough one as well.
That was tough, and it was very hot that day as well, which is never hot in Wales. So that was a shock to the system. But I got my 2 running stones, which basically meant I had 2 tickets in the lottery, and I entered CCC because that was a race I'd qualified to do. I could have done OCC or CCC. I wanted to do the 100k.
Yeah.
So I got through that way. So yeah, it's not one I would recommend as a first for sure, purely because you have to qualify for it. And even if you could just go and do it, you've got altitude to think about. You've got serious amounts of elevation. I mean, the climbs are the climb that was where my undoing came was brutal. The climb, I wasn't too bad with the actual climb itself, but yeah, tough. Lots of switchbacks, very steep, lots of routes, and it was hot, humid. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it's a first timers race, but I would definitely recommend it to anybody to try and qualify to get over there. And qualification basically means finish a UTMB race somewhere in the world. And there's some great ones to do.
I want to say when I looked at it, there was maybe only 2 or 3, I think, over here in the US, which seems, I mean, I know there's UT Snowdonia as well is that the only UK one?
No, the arc of attrition has just
Perfect.
been snapped up, which
Wonderful. Well, I say wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I know that was a good race. That was a great local race from what I can tell.
Yeah.
I wonder how that's now going to go now that it's under UTMB banner. But I guess reserve judgment there
Yes.
and until we see. But that's on my list of racing. I have a list of UK races that I still need to come and do, but that's on it.
Yeah.
So
still Jane and Fergie, the race directors. So I know they are going to try very hard to keep it as arc of attrition-y as possible. Because that's a magical race. That is. I crewed.
That's what I hear. Yeah, really good one.
I crewed some of my athletes for it earlier this year, and I didn't run it, and I came away from it just like mystified by it.
Mystified by it.
Yeah, just amazing. Just a magical race.
I know, man. This is maybe just me. I love some coastal running, which is really hard to get here in the US. There's a lot of great running here, but there's not really coastal running in the same manner that the Arc is, or there's another race that I ran over there called the Ring of Fire on Anglesey in North Wales. Yeah. But I just find it absolutely magical, running along coastal cliffs and dropping down onto beaches and coming up through villages and all the people out on the streets. I mean, it's phenomenal, and I haven't found anywhere like that over here. Fantastic. If you want a running holiday, pick a coastal race in the UK and come over and do one or two of those. They're just tremendous, I think.
I mean, the Arc is a little bit extra special because it's the Cornish coast in winter.
Yes, it's February, isn't it? I want to say
January.
It
can be brutal, like really brutal. You've got 70-mile-an-hour winds coming off the Atlantic. It hasn't been like that the last 2 years. It's actually been quite pleasant.
Like pleasant for Cornwall in January, or actually pleasant?
No, it was actually pleasant this year.
Right.
Yeah, it was like beautiful sunsets and quite temperate conditions. It was just very nice running conditions this year. But in some previous years, it's been horrific.
Yes, I've seen some of the videos of people getting blown sideways on those cliffs as they're through the wind and stuff, and that's what happened to me. Actually, I did the Lakeland 100 last year, but I actually got timed out at Branthwaite, I think, which is fairly early on, but weather related. And you talked about technical descents. There are some technical descents on one or two of those early first 30-mile hills, shall we call them, over there?
Yeah, well, that was the race I did at the end of July. I did the 50.
Really? So you missed all the hard stuff at the beginning. Yeah. I did about 9 or 9,500 feet of climbing in like 34 miles through the Lake District, and it was pitch black and sideways rain and wind, and I actually slipped on one of those technical descents and found out later I had fractured my humerus, but managed to carry on, and I hit Branthwaite with 3 minutes to spare, and I was shivering and needed to warm up, and I didn't have time to do what I needed to do. But yeah, I mean, it just, weather related stuff and all good. Now, Nick, you also have, as we talked about earlier on, your coaching business now, Maximum Mileage Coaching.
I do.
Tell us about the coaching side of things for you. How did this come about? What kind of services do you offer? And is there a particular coaching, if I can say it correctly, coaching ethos that you lead with? What's Maximum Mileage all about?
Yeah, so this might sound like, well, surely all coaches are like that, but I really pride myself on communication and availability. And the reason that might sound surprising is I've had coaches in the past, and there was one in particular coach that I had that I did a race, didn't get a good luck or anything.
Oh dear.
Got a PB in that race, didn't get a congratulations, and that was kind of after already 6, 7, 8 weeks in a row of not hearing anything. No, she used Training Peaks, no feedback, nothing at all. So I was kind of like, well, this is terrible. Why am I not hearing from my coach? Surely I should be getting some feedback, and particularly having some sort of, well done, you got a PB,
like a great race.
So. And I had some, a couple of other coaches afterwards, and one was amazing, a guy called Mike. I learned quite a lot from him, but I was kind of in the process of thinking, well, the quality of coaching in the UK isn't great. I'd quite like to maybe impart my running knowledge on people, because sort of gone from being a back of the pack runner myself. My first ever 5K was like 36 minutes, and so my first marathon was a total disaster zone.
Oh, you and me both, yeah.
But, improved over the years, became a total geek with all my running books, which I've got above my head on the shelf here. And it just incidentally, in my corporate job, my job was in charge of learning and development for several companies over the years. So I kind of always been in that kind of realms of, I love helping people improve. And I thought, well, perhaps I could do that with my running. So I decided to get my UK athletics license. I paid for myself to do that. I got my UESCA ultra running certification. And just kind of alongside my day job, I thought, well, maybe I'll see if some of my friends want some coaching, and started doing that, some for free, and then started charging maybe £20 a month. And then, just over the last sort of nearly 4 years, I just kept plugging away really for the first couple of years. And then certainly the last year and a half, 2 years, I've really sort of proven that I get results for people, and I could maybe turn this into an actual business, have a bit of freedom in my life. So it's been a real labor of love over the last few years. But I've actually recently, just 2 months ago, gone full-time as a coach now. I've got
Congrats.
a great group of athletes. And I use that word athletes because everybody's an athlete. And I coach people from, I've got a few that are sub 3 hour marathoners right up to 6 hour marathoners. I've got a couple of ultra runners that I coach that find themselves on podiums, and I've got some ultra runners that are quite happy just to be coached to have a nice day out for their races. So I don't work with any elite athletes, and quite frankly, I don't want to. I wouldn't want to. I like working with people who, like me, have got they want to run a good race, whatever their goal is, whether that's just to do it comfortably or do a time or whatever it might be. But people with kids, people with jobs, people with stuff going on that people I can relate to. So I love it. I really, really love it. And being able to do it now full time has really helped with our family situation, because my wife unfortunately isn't well, which is a strange thing to say, because she looks and is generally very well, but unfortunately she does have secondary breast cancer that spread to her brain. So it's a bit of a
sorry to hear that.
It's a bit of a you only live once sort of opportunity, really, and it really helps us from a family side of things. And she really inspires me and really supports me, and so it's kind of helps with our family situation as well, now that I don't have a boss to to say, I can't come to that meeting, I've got to take my wife to the clinic or whatever it might be.
Yeah, you are the boss now.
Exactly.
What are the challenges you found with setting up a coaching business for, I guess, running in general? Was it easy to get off the ground? Was it, I guess you'd already kind of rolled into it part-time. Was that an easy transition? What are some of the challenges you found from sort of starting your own small business, essentially?
Yeah, I think particularly the time I started was when it was still a little bit COVID times. I was one of them. There were just so many people that became running coaches, particularly on Instagram. It's full of Instagram coaches. I am on Instagram, but I don't really get any clients from Instagram. Most of my clients come from, usually word of mouth or Google. And incidentally, I've got 3 clients in the US. One of them's in Colorado, in Boulder, one's in Ohio, and one in Illinois. And I have had somebody in Florida as well. So, the beauty of all the effort that I put into my website is that it does get noticed across the globe. And then the beauty of the world that we live in now is that we've got the technology to be able to coach people from afar without ever even meeting them. It sounds crazy, but I get great results from it. Yeah, and I always say, unless, if you want a coach that's in person, great. But unless you're running around them on a track, if as soon as you start running down the road and you turn around the corner, you're remote anyway. So
yeah. I was going to ask, do you see or find any difference in your US folks than your UK folks potentially, or other parts of the world? Are we different as a client? There's no right answer.
No, I would say
I just wondered.
Yes, from an ultra running perspective, yes, because of the the differences in terrain and race requirements, kit. And so, that's something I always kind of go through with my clients, no matter where they are in the world, but certainly in the US, it's like, right, okay, so what kit do you have to have, which usually isn't a lot.
No, it's very, very different.
Which then kind of does help with, right, okay, so how fast are they able to run it, which is usually faster because they're carrying less equipment. But also, what are the crewing requirements that they're going to need? Because in the UK and Europe, yes, you are allowed crew for the most part, but not all the time. I mean, you'll probably remember with Lakeland, you're not allowed crew.
No.
At all.
No, they can't go anywhere.
100 miles.
Yes.
No crew.
Yeah.
At all. Which,
in fact, they tell you that. They're very specific about that in the notes.
Yeah.
Like, don't show up.
Yeah. Which, in something like Leadville or Western States, which is just totally unheard of, because you can have crew everywhere. And you really need crew, because you can't carry all your fuel, all your hydration for the whole 100 miles. You need that crew. So, I think that's kind of one of the biggest differences is really getting into the detail, even more so with the racing, because I haven't done a lot of racing in the US. I've done some running in the US, but not a lot of racing. So kind of my knowledge of races in the US is usually from studying past years, watching YouTube from past years.
Yeah.
But really sort of working with my clients on their strategies is a little bit more different, because it usually means who have you got crewing for you, whereas in the UK you can kind of get away with it.
Yeah, especially on longer races, it's really something that's done a lot. Like, people go with a crew, and then there's a whole ethos behind crewing where you pay for the crew to go, and you have to figure out where they're going to stay, and it becomes this whole administrative, logistical add-on burden to the race that you have to think about, because you're trying to organize a crew, and then where are they going to be, and how are they going to get from aid station to aid station? What are they going to do in between? How fast are you going to travel, so that, because you got to figure out when you're going to be at each of these crew accessible stations, and how far are they from where your crew. I mean, it's this whole. I mean, it's like it adds 100% to your race prep, logistically, and a whole bunch of stress to a race potentially too. So I do think that's something to consider as part of racing, which may or may not be applicable in other races, other parts of the world, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Nick, each episode, one of the other things we like to do here on the show is just a fun little section. We like to choose a song to add to the free Spotify Choose to Endure playlist, something family-friendly that lifts you up or motivates you or just kind of keeps you moving while you're out on the trail. Now, you picked a kind of a different song for the group here, I would say.
I can change it on the fly if you need me to.
No, I think it's great. Do you want to let us know which song you chose, and then why this one kind of resonated or jumped out for you to pick?
Yeah, okay. So, this song is called I Refuse, and it's by Netski, a Shock One remix. So, I like drum and bass. Sorry.
Yeah. And so you might have to explain to the US crowd what drum and bass is, because I don't think that's super it's popular over here.
Yeah. So it's definitely in the realms of dance music.
Yes, I would say so, yes.
Some drum and bass can be a little hard and aggressive, and this is definitely not hard and aggressive at all. It's got a really, really good bass line to it. And the reason I like this is, so with everything going on with my wife, I actually, and I also had inguinal hernia surgery at in fact, almost exactly 1 year to the date. And with all of that, I'd actually put quite a bit of weight on. I wasn't really sort of feeling myself. And then I entered a mountainous ultra in the Brecon Beacons in Wales, in
brilliant.
the UK.
Yeah.
In February. It's actually a race I've done twice before, but this version, they called it the extreme version. It went up and over some of the Penifan route.
Yes.
Anyway, so I went into that race very kind of not my usual sort of competitive self. I just went out just to have a day in the mountains, really. And I started way back. I had no intention of sort of moving through the field. But yeah, sort of after we kind of got over the fans and the sort of initial tough bit, I wasn't being a little bit overweight at the time as well. I was not really moving uphill as well as I have done in the past. But kind of when we got up to this sort of boggy, very boggy section, it's like 3 or 4 miles of, I'm not kidding, sort of chest-high bogs in some places. But I moved very well over that type of ground, and I just started moving really well, started overtaking people, and I just started feeling a bit more like myself. And then I got to the the halfway checkpoint, and one of my athletes on my coaching group said, "Oh, Nick's moved up like 100 places. He's running really well."
Wow.
And I saw this text. I was like, "Oh my God, where am I in the field then?" So I text my athletes, and while I was at the aid station, they said, you're in 40th. I was like, okay. I started well back, so that's pretty cool. And then it got a lot more runnable, and I just started finding that I was running really well. And even though my belly was bouncing up and down a little bit, I was sort of knocking out a few sub 7-minute miles at sort of mile 34, mile 37. I was
holy crap!
Like, my God, where is this coming from? And just started overtaking a few more people, and then that song came on just at a point where on my little WhatsApp group and all my notifications are coming up on my watch. My athletes are like, he's overtaking people left, right, and centre here. And my heckles went up, and I just went into, right, let's go.
Right, let's go.
And this song just kind of started that. And I ended up finishing 8th.
Wow. Great job.
Yeah. Sort of, and it was a moment of just kind of I'm back. It's been a really terrible couple of years with my wife's health, and I've not really raced my best recently, and everything. I just had a moment of I'm back. Let's go. Let's do this. And it was this song that kind of just got my goosebumps going.
Brilliant. I love that sort of emotional response to a song. Do you feel that way? Like if you listen to it since, it kind of takes you back to that moment, to that race? And
I mean, it's on my running playlist, so I listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
No, it's a good one.
I love the ability of music to do that. That's kind of why we started this, to create this playlist of uplifting tunes that kind of hopefully triggers something in people as they're running around or as they're just listening to it. I love this tune. I listen to it, folks. In the US, if you're listening to this, you may not be familiar with drum and bass, but I would say go and listen to this tune. It's got this relentless energy about it. And if you listen closely to the lyrics, if you can get to them, it definitely has that sort of determination to push through challenges and not giving up vibe to it. So obviously that's pretty relevant in our ultra running world. It's a great song, and it's fast, and it's got a great beat. So it'll get your heart pumping as you go for sure. And I'll make sure I get that song added to the playlist so that folks out there can enjoy it as much as you do. Thank you so much again, Nick, for coming on and sharing your knowledge about strength training, tying it in for us as back of the pack runners to, I think, your tips on how to incorporate strength and the exercises that you talked about, and making sure we remember recovery and the timing of some of the strength that we do. I'm sure that will help out our listeners a ton, and that's an English ton, not an American ton. I definitely appreciate your time and all of your insights, and I look forward to seeing how you bounce back after your recent CCC DNF.
I feel good. I've got Boulder Marathon next week, so.
Well, I forgot. Yes, you had said about that. So that'll be interesting too. I just looked at that, and I think it looks quite different.
Oh yeah, it's a road marathon, but
yeah. Now, Nick, for anyone interested in talking with you about the services that you were just telling us about from Maximum Mileage, where can individuals go to check out what you have to offer, learn some more, and maybe even connect with you?
Yeah, cool. In terms of connecting with me, Instagram is probably the easiest one. Run with Nick.
Oh, very straightforward. Yeah.
And my website, if people want to learn a little bit more about my services, then my website, which is maximummileagecoaching.com.
And folks, while you're out there, right before we came on air, I was just telling Nick that I was so grateful that he managed to spell Enquire correctly as part of his website, Enquire and not Inquire. So definitely go find the maximummileagecoaching.com website and have a look for yourself while you're out there on the internet searching for more information about Nick and about his coaching business. Don't forget, you can also subscribe to this show as well. Get notified each time a new episode comes out. And of course, follow, share, and like. It would be very much appreciated. Doing any of those things really helps promote the show. It helps get the word out. And that in turn increases the chances of other runners like you and I finding the information that awesome guests like Nick have given up their time to come on the show and share with us. You can find this show on Instagram, Facebook, and over at choosetoendure.com. So be sure to head over to any of those spots, check us out, say hello, drop us a text message or a line. info@choosetoendure.com is our email address. Feel free to suggest a topic if you have a moment. Really like getting those interactions and hearing what you guys have to say. So until then, go practice some strength training so that you can continue to run long, run strong, and keep choosing to endure.